Hi, everybody. Welcome to another
Episode.
I can never remember that word. Episode of the Book Scoop. I'm Priscilla.
I'm Martsje.
And I'm Sarah.
And we're going to talk about some new books from October. I have two picture books, which is about all that I had time to read. One is a retelling of The Three Billy Goats Gruff, and one is a book about goats called Books Aren't for Eating.
I read a nonfiction book. I wanted a serious book, and it's called Reading for Our Lives by Maya Payne Smart.
And I read a young adult book. This is called The Life and Crimes of Hoodie Rosen by Isaac Blum.
Alrighty. So, goats are a favorite of mine. I like sheep better and dogs, but goats are right up there. And so this book is delightful. Books aren't for eating. It's about a goat who loves books because they taste good. But he finally learns to read and discovers that reading books is also good. If you love goats, it makes total sense. If you love reading, it makes total sense. Delightful book.
And she also has written some children's books, some middle grade books.
Sorosiak, I'm not sure how you say her name, but she wrote I, Cosmo, which is told from the dog's perspective, and is an absolutely delightful book. The other, The Three Billy Goats Gruff, and a retelling of The Three Billy Goats Gruff, but this one is like a really good retelling. And it's written by Matt Barnett, and it's illustrated by John Klassen, and as you can see, has some
very John Klassen looking.
John Klassen looking illustrations. A fantastic retelling of The Three Billy Goats Gruff. So,
and he'll even tell you that it's fantastic.
All right. So I read Reading for Our Lives. And the author of this book set out to tell people how they can help their children learn how to read. And you'd be amazed how simple things are that you can do that help your kids learn how to read, even when they're still infants. Because the more you talk to a baby and use different words, the bigger their vocabulary is. Right. It is a book written in very simple, easy to understand language. You don't even have to read it in order. I found that the chapters were fairly standalone. And it made me think when I read it, when I was in my early 20s, I wanted to learn Japanese. So I set out to learn the Japanese alphabets, and they have two for different kinds of words. And, you know, after a few months of repetition, I knew the Japanese alphabet. And then I studied a little bit more, and then I stopped. And for the longest time, when I saw a Daihatsu car, I knew how to spell that in Japanese. But now I don't anymore. And this is just proof that if you learn how to read, you have to keep practicing it. Right. Otherwise you forget, because our brains are not made to read. Talking and listening, yes, they're made for that, not for reading. And I just want to show this. This is telebi in Japanese, and that's television. Now imagine you have to memorize these sounds from these symbols. And then there's, I don't know, in our language, there is like 24 more that you need to know. And for kids, that's very confusing. So you have to keep pointing it out wherever you see words. And, you know, instead of talking about Pokemon, you could say, oh, do you see that word there? And you can point out a letter, and that helps them to read. And we need to be short, so I'll leave it at that. Great book. Check it out.
I do want to say, and I'm not going to remember the woman's name. I think it's Marianne Wolf, but I'm not swearing to that. She wrote Proust and the Squid. She writes a lot of books on how you teach children to read or how the brain works. And she basically says the human brain has not evolved for reading. It has evolved for speaking and storytelling and vision and hearing but you have to take all those different parts to put them together to read. And so, yeah, you do need to help reinforce that.
Right, yeah. And as you were saying, don't talk about Pokemon. Or if you're talking about Pokemon, say, oh, Pokemon, what letter does that start with? What sounds do you hear in that word to make it, it's something fun that they like to talk about.
Yeah.
But you're learning a little bit too, just don't tell them.
Yeah, and you don't have to do it. You don't have to do it all the time.
That's right,
But,
yeah.
Just 4 or 5 times a day, and it helps.
It does, yeah. So I read The Life and Crimes of Hoodie Rosen. And I have to be very honest, I started it and went, oh, I don't like this book. And came and looked for a different book and thought, oh, I didn't find another book. I guess I'll keep reading. I was only a couple chapters in. And that's all it took, was to get through those first couple chapters. And I was like, oh, that's what this book is really about. So Hoodie, his name is Yehuda. He is from an Orthodox Jewish family. And their community had just moved to a new town and were working on building their own buildings, a store, an apartment high-rise, and some other things, and the town kept blocking them. Hoodie's dad is one of the people trying to build it. Hoodie goes to school. Of course, it's to an Orthodox Jewish school. He kind of doesn't really care about school. He's looking out the window and sees this girl, a Gentile girl, who he, of course, should not have any relationship with. And he says, oh, I have to leave, and left school and goes to find this girl. And so they chat, and he's immediately in love. There's some anti-Semitism going on in the town. They find some swastikas on some Jewish graves, and she helps him clean them. And then we find out that her mom is also the mayor. So that adds an extra layer in there. But it's about him trying to decide if everything he's always been taught about having to be an Orthodox Jew and the rules and the religion all around that are what he actually believes, or if it's just they do it because that's what his parents have always done. About the relationship with the girl, about the town and the community. There's some significant violence towards the end of the book towards the Jewish community, and how he reacts to that, how his family reacts to that, and how the rabbis react to that. It was very eye-opening. There were a ton of words in here that I didn't know that I had to look up because a lot of them were Yiddish. But it's really a good book. It opens your eyes to what other people might experience now, today, not what Jewish people experienced, during World War II, but this still happens today. So yeah, I would definitely encourage you to read that.
Wow. I just want to mention 2 books I didn't read, but that are on my to-be-read list, and these are both nonfiction. The first is The Loneliest Places, Lost Grief, and the Long Journey Home by Rachel Dickinson. Rachel Dickinson is a local author from Freeville. This is the story about, these are essays she wrote in the years after her 17-year-old son died from suicide. It's a very raw book, a very emotional book, but a very honest book that deals with very real awful situation. The other one is called Rest is Resistance, a Manifesto. I love this title. This is by Tricia Hersey, who is the founder of the NAP ministry.
NAP?
NAP.
Oh,
yes. Tricia Hersey is a Black woman theologian, and she does a lot of work about how, particularly for Black women in a culture that demands productivity and running yourself ragged just to survive, how sometimes resting is a form of resistance. I think the book is really written a lot for Black women, but I think it has value for everybody. So another good title that came out in October.
Yeah, it sounds like next month we might need to do some fun books.
Yeah.
We all have some very serious books.
We all have very serious books.
Yeah.
Well,
This can be fun. What I read about
yes.
Books aren't for eating was fun.
It is fun, yes. That's right. That's right.
All right. I think some good reads to look into.
Thanks for watching.
joining us.
Yes.
And we'll see you next month.